Welcome to AXREM Insights, developing healthcare through medtech and innovation. Join Melanie Johnson and Sully Edgington as they talk with our industry leaders and experts.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Melanie Johnson, and welcome to our first ever podcast. We will be bringing you many podcast episodes over the year, and we'll be speaking to those you want to hear from. We really want to build on the AXREM community's vibe, so today I'm going to interview my co-host and AXREM CEO, Sully Edgington. Sully has been with AXREM for the last 5 years, and in this time we've seen great changes, and I'm interested to find out more. Welcome, Sully, and thank you for being our first guest. With our podcast theme being Meet the Team, I will hand over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself, what's your story, and how have you ended up here today?
Thanks, Mel. And thank you for asking me to do the first podcast, especially because we're going to be a co-host team going forward. My backstory is probably fairly interesting in terms of I've had a very diverse career, but I think my actual interest in the healthcare sector started at quite a young age. When I was 7, I had an accident and smashed my 2 front teeth, and a few years later, it led to 17 maxillofacial operations during my teenage years, and I formed a real interest in that area of work. I did my 2 weeks work experience at Bedford South Wing Hospital, having spent time in radiology. I went on ward rounds, I went into theatre and saw quite a few different operations being performed, and I ended up raising quite a lot of money for the hospital as well. And then kind of fast forward a few years, because I didn't get the exam results that I would love to have got to be able to pursue a career as a maxillofacial surgeon, I trained to become an orthodontic nurse. And this was kind of my first experience of x-rays, when I used to stand in an old house in Cambridge, which was the surgery, under the stairs in a dark cupboard, actually developing the images and then hanging them on like a little washing line. So I was thinking kind of back to kind of where, different interests in this sector came from. But over my career, I've worked as a national sales manager, selling a whole host of different products and services, a lettings manager. But my actual qualifications, I used to run pubs and restaurants and hotels. So I've got quite a diverse career, but I think that's actually what's made me quite multifunctional in the role that I now do for AXREM. I'm also a mum to 2 children and married to my fabulous husband who supports me. So hopefully that's what you're looking for in terms of who I am and, what I'm about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just going back, if you don't mind me asking, are you able to tell us a little bit more about what actually happened, what injuries you suffered, how it happened, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no, so I was basically walking home from a friend's house and I tripped over a fire hydrant cover that hadn't been fixed up after they'd done some work to it. And I literally just fell down, smashed my 2 front teeth, and they'd only just come through, my second teeth. And I had those capped and didn't think anything of it. And then a couple of years later, my surgeon said it was delayed trauma. And I came home from school looking like someone had thumped me in the face. And I'd got abscesses that had all leaked up into different areas of my gums and cavities within my head. And the next day had emergency surgery, and one surgery led to another. There was complications. I always say I'm a bit complex, but there was complications at every step of the way. And it led to me having to have my hip fractured and have bone grafts taken. And most recently, because I lose bone in my gums, I had a collagen implant, which has lasted much better. But it's a well-known fact that when you go through pregnancy, it can actually cause you to have bone, loss and receding. And because I suffer from that anyway, it made it quite, a lot worse. So generally, people don't know that I've had surgeries and stuff until you tell them, and then you can see now my lopsided smile. But yeah, it was definitely an experience, and I've been through a lot of surgery. Even when my daughter was born was my last surgery. So it went on for many, many years.
Oh, wow. So obviously you've had a diverse kind of career, which has led you to where you are today, and obviously doing a fantastic job for AXREM. So would you say that's probably why you're quite passionate about what you do, or are there other drivers that drive you?
Yeah, so I think that my backstory is, life for anyone isn't easy, and I've had some ups and downs along the way. So I've always had a really good work ethic. I've always worked really hard. I want to teach my children, I say children, they're adults now, but teach them that they should be working hard. And that's one thing that they have a lot of respect for me about, is they know that mum works hard and always has. Yeah, so like a lot of people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a career. And then I got the job at the BHTA and I just got it. I just knew what a trade association was and what they were about. So I think that that's always been my driver. And I think because I always wanted to work in the healthcare sector but didn't have the qualifications to be able to do so, this job means that I indirectly make a difference to people's lives, to patients. And I've been a patient myself a lot in the past. And so therefore I have that kind of angle on both sides. And I always say to people, I probably have had more x-rays than a handful of people would have in their entire lifetime. When I was a child and teenager, I was having multiple x-rays every single week. So, I know, from a patient perspective, what it is like in a radiology department. When I had my hip done, I had ultrasounds, I've had scans, and, so I think I've probably experienced quite a few of our members' equipment in my lifetime.
No, super. As I say, so for you, you've used the NHS and you understand the importance of keeping an NHS. So what would you think is one of the biggest challenges within the NHS, obviously for you personally as AXREM CEO?
Yeah, so I think, and it's something I've been talking about a lot recently, I think one of the biggest challenges is we talk about one NHS, but actually there's lots of individual trusts, and certainly from a industry perspective, that adds so many layers of complexity. It means that there's a lack of consistency. Obviously, we hear in the headlines about not enough funding. We see that from our work. We know about the waiting lists for cancer. We see that in our radiotherapy special focus group, the lack of funding and accessibility to radiotherapy. So I think there are a number of challenges. And I think in a year where we're going to see a general election and we don't know what a new government might look like, that is only going to add, more complexity to the system, but also uncertainty. And I think at the moment, having come through COVID and the uncertainty that created, we need to have some time of stability. And we also need a government that are going to make long-term strategic funding in the NHS, and that where they're planning long-term funding and long-term replacement equipment and everything else that's required. And I think the other challenge, which we talk about a lot with some of our partners like the RCR, the SOR, BIR, BEMUS, etc., is the workforce crisis. And, as industry, it's very hard for us to obviously help with that. But some of our innovations and products and services can certainly help create the efficiencies and triage, etc., that would be needed to help with the workforce and, trying to make their job a little bit easier.
So AXREM then, so then and now, you've been in AXREM for the last almost 5 years, seen a lot of changes. So can you just give us a little bit of background to when you started? What was it like? Where are we now? The journey you've been on? Any hurdles, big successes that stand out?
Absolutely. It's been a whirlwind 5 years. I've actually been at AXREM just over 5 years now. So it's my anniversary a couple of weeks ago. And what a transformation, and something I will forever be proud of and absolutely career highlight is being at AXREM. And I think that the growth that we have seen is probably unprecedented in a trade association environment. When I started, we had 16 member companies and we've now got 57. And probably by the time this goes out, hopefully we'll be 60. So we've seen growth of over 250% in our membership, which is, if you go to any business and say, I can grow your business 250%, I think they'd be quite happy with that in a 5-year period. But what's really important now is maintaining those members, maintaining the work that we do and the service that our members have come to expect. You say about challenges, yes, there were challenges. I think AXREM had been a good organisation, for many, many years, but it had become a little bit stagnant. So I think actually taking members and the companies and our stakeholders on that transformational journey has been challenging. Not everyone likes change. Even I don't like change sometimes, as you know now. And, we all have to be open to that. And so when I joined AXREM, the first year I watched, I listened and I learned, because at the end of the day, members are the experts. I'm here to make sure that AXREM is viable and financially is strong. So I did a lot of learning. And then over that year, I kind of formed a vision of where I think we could take AXREM. And that's where we're still on that road now. And I'm somebody that never thinks we're there. There's always going to be ways we can develop. It doesn't mean to say we constantly want to develop and come bigger and bigger. We know who we are, we know what we're about, and we know what we're good at. So we just want to make sure we're as representative of the market that we currently represent as possible. I don't see that there'll be other areas of growth in terms of diversifying our membership, because there's other trade associations that are experts in their field, and I want to stick to what we're good at. I think in terms of highlights, there has been so many. I think that being nominated for the last 3 years for Trade Association Forum Awards against huge trade associations that employ dozens of staff, and what our chairman actually made a comment yesterday in a meeting, that we are a small organisation and we're punching way above our weight in terms of the coverage and the work that we do. So to be nominated with other big trade associations has been amazing. To win the Innovation of the Year award last year for the AXREM member accreditation scheme is definitely a highlight, and certainly launching that and being able to save so much money for the NHS and our member companies was a highlight. And a personal highlight was winning the Outstanding Achievement Award a couple of years ago, but also being recognised on the Women in Trade Associations Power List. I would never have thought 5-10 years ago that I would ever be have this platform to be able to do good, and I want to use the platform as much as I can to do as good as I can for as long as possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I feel super proud to be part of this organisation and the work that AXREM are doing. So what's the future going to look like, Sally? How can you foresee the next 2 years, 5 years of AXREM?
Yeah, so I think that my kind of plan really is we are continuing to grow membership at quite a rapid speed. So we need to have staff to kind of prop that up. As you know, me and you are working at, way above our 100% capacity, meaning that we're doing a lot of hours. So I want to grow the team and develop the team, and personal development is really important to me. I want to make sure that I'm developing and the team that I lead develop. So I think we'll be doing a lot of work around that over the next 12 to 18 months. I think that by the end of next year, I envisage that we will be probably as representative of our industry as we can be, a very high percentage. For MR and CT, we're pretty much 100% representative. Patient monitoring, we've got a little bit of work to do. I want to develop our membership there. And our new affiliate membership, I'd like to get more of the products and services that sit around our main modalities in membership, so that we have all the expertise and knowledge to be able to have an industry voice in all areas of diagnostic imaging, radiotherapy, and the different modalities that we cover. I think there are other ways that we can develop. So, for instance, we're now doing our different partnership agreements, and we're working really closely, for instance, with the International Imaging Congress. I would like to see that as the start of our relationship, and we can develop that further next year, and we can grow the show, and AXREM can be a real prominent kind of feature of that show. So I think there's lots of ways that we'll constantly be developing, but I'm not a standstill person. So we're never going to be, going along that baseline. We're always going to be going in an upward direction, and I need to be quite creative and thoughtful about how we can do that. And things like this podcast, just kind of thinking outside the box, trying to do things differently, giving our industry, our stakeholders a platform to really talk about the things that are important to our industry.
No, absolutely. As I say, there's so much going on with AXREM. Sometimes I sit there and think, how do we do it all? So how do you?
So do I.
Yeah. So for you personally, how do you kind of compartmentalize all of what's going on? How do you deal with it? Because there's so much all the time. Obviously, I have my techniques that I deal with, but I'm really interested to find out how you kind of deal with that.
So I constantly feel like I've got about 100 balls in the air that I'm juggling at any one time, and I can't even juggle 3 balls physically. But I do have a lot. It's a very diverse job, but I think that's what keeps me interested. I'm not a 9 till 5 sit at a desk, do the same thing every day person. That's just not me. It's just not my personality. I have to, as I'm getting older and my memory's not as good as it used to be, my diary is my literal, that's what keeps me going. I have to put lots of reminders, but I think it's just making sure you document it. Obviously, we've got lots of processes and procedures in place that we both use to make sure that we know exactly every communication we have with members is logged, so we know who's been reaching out to members at what time. So yeah, I think it is about who you are as a person as to whether you can cope with this kind of diverse workload. But yeah, I think it's just I know what's important to AXREM, I know what's important to our members, and that's what I'm constantly striving to achieve.
Yeah, you do literally live and breathe it, don't you?
Yeah,
AXREM is in your blood now.
Absolutely. Probably a bit too much. My family want me back at some point in the future.
So you mentioned about the Women in Power list. Do you feel that there is still that gap and that divide, or do you feel very much part of everything and there aren't any challenges, or how do you feel about that?
I've never been a big feminist, I don't think of there being a gap between a man and a woman. I think that we're all equal, and I was saying to somebody yesterday, whether I meet a parliamentarian or I'm talking to you, I talk to everybody the same, and I think that's what people respect. I definitely think, certainly in AXREM, we have seen, when I started, I think there was one woman on our exec committee and very little engagement for women in our special focus groups. If you now look at AXREM, we are so much more diverse now than we have ever been, and I'm really proud of that. And we've got some really, really good female leaders coming through in some of our member businesses like Siemens, Probo, Bracco. When you look at some of those leaders and the senior position holders, they are females. And that is so important. I think you get different perspective on things, but I also think we've seen diversity in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity. We are definitely engaging much, much better with a much wider portfolio of members. And I think as well, when I started, we'd have kind of just like one key contact per company. We've got 57 member companies, but we've got a list of about 500 members within those 57 companies that we now communicate with. So that shows the sheer diversity of the work that we're doing and who knows about AXREM. And I think initiatives that you've led, such as the Future Leaders Council, is absolutely key to our diversity. And when you look at our Future Leaders Council, it's very diverse. It's almost half and half female, male. So I think that's really positive for AXREM going forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. So if I was a member company potentially exploring whether to join AXREM, what would you say to me? What are the benefits? Why should I join AXREM?
Yeah, and it's really difficult because you don't have a product that you're selling, if you like, and it shouldn't be a sale. To me, if you work in our space, you would want to be part of that industry voice. Now, we have very highly competitive companies that sit around the table, and when they walk into that room, it is such a lovely dynamic to see that their competitive natures, to a certain degree, are pushed aside, and what they want to be there for is to do what's right by the NHS, by the patient, and that is what I think drives a lot of companies to be a member. We obviously collect market data. That is another reason that especially the OEMs would want to be a member, because they can understand their position within the market. I think as we're progressing our work with government engagement, certainly we're going to be talking in higher forums than we currently do. We're part of the National Imaging Board, the Diagnostic Industry Advisory Group. We have regular meetings with the Department of Health and Social Care, NICE, MHRA, all the different organisations that are involved in our sector. And so companies won't always have the access to that information, and we're able to make sure that members can make really informed decisions within their businesses because we're providing the right information to them. So I would certainly say that being part of AXREM, for me, if I was a business, would be a given. It would be something you would automatically do. And I think that as we're growing, we're seeing more of that. More companies are approaching us. I do not want to be a salesperson. I do not go out there selling membership, but I will answer inquiries and then tell people the reasons why they should be a member.
No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. Right. So we're just going to go to a bit of a quirky question now. Okay. So if you could hang out with any cartoon character or famous person, who would it be and why?
Wow. Gosh, you've got me on the spot now.
I like to do that. Just chuck that one in there, really random.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that is quite hard. Cartoon characters is really not my thing, so it'll have to be a famous person. It would probably be somebody like, I don't know. At the end of the day, AXREM is an organisation, but I have to run it a little bit as a business. And in a past life, I actually did try out for The Apprentice and got quite a long way down the audition process. So probably Alan Sugar. He's a businessman, but he's quite an inspirational person. And also Karen, who assists him, Karen Brady. She is a very prominent female businesswoman, and I look up to people like that. So I think that I'd probably want to hang out with them and get some more advice about how I could improve myself, and some of my business techniques, and how I could impact AXREM with those improvements.
You know what, actually, I can just so picture you around the table with Alan Sugar. I could just see it now.
The sheer, can I just say that the sheer frustration I get by watching The Apprentice, I'm just one episode into this series at the moment, and it is so frustrating because I would love to be able to go on there and do better. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but it is just sheer frustration.
Are you a person that sits on the sideline judging them on TV?
I wouldn't say I judge. I just feel frustrated because I know that there's things that they could do better. And I'm very self-critical. Every meeting I go to, after on the way home, I debrief myself. I think, right, I could have done that. I could have said that. And I'm constantly trying to improve who I am. I want to be the best version of myself, and I want AXREM to be the best version of itself as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for opening up today. As I say, I personally know you very well. We've been obviously friends for a long time, as well as working together. But I think it's been nice for me as well to see that kind of journey of that timeline of where you kind of started, why you wanted to be interested in this kind of career path, and where you are today. And hopefully that's been really beneficial for everybody else to hear and listen, to get to know you a bit better as well. I hope you've enjoyed being on the show.
I have, and I'm looking forward to our double act, Mel. I think we've known each other long enough that we can have a bit of fun with this and make sure that the podcasts are relevant and informative for anyone that's listening.
A big thank you to Sally for being our first guest, and thank you to the listeners. Join me and Sally next week when we'll be speaking to AXREM Chair Jeevan Gutnaratnam. Thanks again, and catch you next week. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe, or feel free to share the podcast with friends.